In today's note, we are going to look at the standard form of the equation of a line. So standard form, we can see some examples here, but standard form generally follows the pattern ax plus by plus c equals 0. And a, b, and c are all constants or coefficients, they're values. And that is considered the slope or the standard form of a line. So this is standard form. And usually what we're used to seeing is y equals mx plus b, which is known as the slope intercept form, because it gives us our slope and our y-intercept. So what we want to do in these equations, if we're given standard form, we want to be able to rearrange them so that they state the slope and the y-intercept. And in order to do that, we need to get it to the slope-intercept form. So if I'm looking at the first equation, x plus y minus 3 equals 0, I want to rearrange this so that it looks like y equals mx plus b. So in order to do that, I need y on one side and everything else, all the other variables, all the other numbers, moved over to the other side. And this is going to rely on our knowledge of solving equations or algebra about moving things to other sides of the equal sign. Now we're not solving for anything, we're just moving things to get it into the right form. So if I want to move this minus 3 over, I have to plus 3 from the one side, plus 3 on the other, which will cancel out on the one side, and we're left with x plus y equals 3. I still am not in my y equals mx plus b form because I have x and y on the same side. I can move the x over by subtracting x from both sides. Again, it'll cancel out on one side, and I'm left with y equals negative x plus 3. And so now I have it in the slope-intercept form. Again, remember, I can't subtract x from 3 because they're not like terms, so they just have to stay where they are. Right? They're going to stay separate terms. So looking at this, I should be able to find my m, or my slope, because that's the value in front of the x. I only see the negative here, and when I don't see a number, I have to assume it's a negative 1, because 1 is the only number that I can multiply by and not have to show it. My b value is my constant, or the number at the end, so in this case, 3. For example, b, same idea, except I have different values now, or I have other values. I still want to get it into y equals mx plus b. I want to get it into that form because then I can pick out my m and my b value. So I want to start by moving all the separate terms away from the y, and then I'll worry about the number attached to the y. So to get rid of minus 15, I need to add 15. I'm going to add 15 to both sides. It'll cancel out on one side. I have 6y, or not 6y, 6x minus 3y equals 15. Now I want to move this 6x, so I'm going to minus 6x from one side, minus it from the other. It'll cancel out. Minus 3y equals negative 6x plus 15. Now I don't have y by itself yet because I still have a coefficient or a number attached to it. So I need to cancel that out. Again, remember, when a number is attached to a variable, the operation is multiplication. So to cancel out multiplication, I'm going to divide. So I'm going to divide the one side by negative 3 and divide everything on the other side by negative 3 as well. And in the end, let me just bring this up over here. What I'm left with is y equals, and then negative 6 divided by negative 3 is 2, so 2x, and then 15 divided by negative 3 is negative 5. So this is my slope-intercept form of the equation, and I should be able to pick out my m value, which is 2, and the b value, which is -5. For the next question, I want, again, going through the same steps. I want to get it into y equals mx plus b form, because that is how I can determine the slope and the y-intercept. So I want to have +4, or I have -4. I'm going to cancel it out by adding 4 to both sides. One side cancels out. I'm left with x plus 2y equals 4. Get rid of the x by subtracting it from one side, subtract it from the other. 2y equals -x plus 4. Get y by itself by dividing both sides by 2. One side will cancel out. Y equals -1 over 2x plus 2. So here is our slope-intercept form. So now I can state the slope, m equals, and I see it attached to the x, or the multiplier, -1 over 2, and the y-intercept is the constant, or 2. Same idea again with b. I want to get it into y equals mx plus b form. So I need to move all the separate terms away from the y. So in order to get rid of +8, I'm going to -8, minus it from the other side of the equal sign. One side cancels out. X minus 4y equals -8. I want to move the x, so I'm going to subtract x from one side, subtract x from the other. It cancels out on one side. Don't forget that negative is attached to the 4, so it stays -4y equals -x minus 8. Now to get the y by itself, remember it is multiplying, so I cancel that out by dividing. Divide everything on the other side by -4. And we're left with y equals -1 divided by -4 is positive, so 1 over 4x plus 2. So m is 1 over 4, and b is 2. So you can see it's kind of following this general pattern. We move the x, or the constant, or just the number over, then we move the x value, and then we divide by whatever value's in front of the y. Same thing again for C. Just another example. Follow the same patterns to get into y equals mx plus b form. Get rid of the +5 or the number. Subtract 5 from both sides. So x minus y equals -5. Now we move the x, so minus x from both sides. One side cancels out. The negative still stays in front of the y. Don't forget about that. It's still there attached in front of the y. We haven't canceled it out yet. So we have -x minus 5. Now it looks like y is on its own. However, that negative in front we need to get rid of, because if we look at our slope-intercept form, the y is not negative, the y is positive. So we want this to be a positive y. So in order to do that, I have to divide by -1 and divide everything else on the other side by -1. So then we're left with y equals x plus 5. This is now my slope-intercept form. It's in y equals mx plus b form. I can get my slope now. Slope is 1, or the number attached to the x. I don't see anything, so it has to be 1. And my b value is the constant, or 5. So again, same kind of steps that we've been doing. Once we get to slope-intercept form, it's just identifying the m and the b value, which we should be familiar with. The last example, we're going to look at a word scenario. So the celebrations banquet hall uses the equation 25n minus c plus 120 or 1250 equals 0 to determine the cost for a hall rental, where c represents the cost in dollars, which depends on n, the number of people attending. Express the equation in slope y-intercept form or slope-intercept form. So again, this just means y equals mx plus b. It's going to be a little bit different because the variables used are different, but because we've talked about the cost c depending on n, or the number of people attending, we can replace our dependent variable y with c because we know that c depends on n, and then we can replace our independent variable x with n because we know that the number of people does not depend on the cost. The cost depends on the number of people. So you could think of it as I wanted to get it into c equals mn plus b form. So if I start off with my equation, 25n minus c plus 1 or 1250 equals 0. We now know the general form that we want to get it into, so we go through the same steps that we've been doing. I want to move this constant over, so minus 1250 from one side, minus 1250 from the other side. One side cancels out, and you're left with 25n minus c equals negative 1250. Here, let's move the n to the other side, the n term. So if I have 25n or plus 25n, I want a minus 25n from one side, minus 25n from the other side. One side is going to cancel out, and I'm left with negative c equals negative 25n minus 1250. It's going to bring it up here. Let me just rewrite it. So it looks almost in the same form, except again, similar to one of the last examples, I have a negative in front of the c value. I don't want a negative in front of that value. I want it on its own. So in order to get rid of that, I have to divide everything by negative 1. Or I'm dividing it by the number in front of c, which in this case is negative 1. Cancels out on one side, and I'm left with c equals 25n plus 1250. So this is my equation in slope y-intercept form, and this looks a little bit more familiar to what I'm used to, or what we're used to. And it's really easy now to pick out some key information about this scenario, because we can easily see what the constant is and what the multiplier happens to be. Part B asks to identify the fixed and variable costs. So the fixed cost is our y-intercept, or our constant, and our variable cost is just another way of referring to our multiplier, or our rate of change, or our slope. And now we can get this clearly from our equation, that c equals 25n plus 1250. So our fixed, or our constant, is clearly 1250. So that means that when renting this hall, there's a flat fee of 1250 that a person's charged. The variable cost, or the multiplier, is 25. So that means that it is $25 a person. So you could say, therefore, $1,250 or $1,250 flat fee plus $25 per person. Part C wants us to use this equation to determine the rental cost if 100 people attend a soccer banquet. So the 100 people represents the n. So what I need to do now is, in my equation, c equals 25n plus 1250, I'm going to plug n in or sub in n equals 100 and solve for the cost. So 25 times 100 plus 1250 . And when I go through and solve, I get 3,750. That's my final answer. So therefore, it will cost $3,750 for 100 people. D asks us to determine the number of people who can attend if the cost is $5,325. So what we're doing here is similar to the last one, except instead of subbing in for n, we're going to sub in a cost of $5,325. We do have our formula, so C equals 25n plus 1250. I know my cost in this scenario is 5,325 equals 25n plus 1250, and now I need to solve for n. Let me just put solve for C. So we sub in and solve for n. So we're going to solve for n by getting rid of the separate term. So we're going to minus 1250 from one side, minus it from the other. You could think of it as I'm taking away the flat fee or the rental fee. So when I do that, 5,325 minus 1250, I get 4,075 equals 25n. So by taking away the rental fee, the leftover cost is basically the cost of the number of people who attended. So to figure out how many people, I'm going to take that amount and divide it by 25, or if I'm solving my equation, I'm trying to get n by itself. To get rid of that multiplying, I'm going to divide. And when I divide by 25, I get 163 equals n, or therefore 163 people attended for $5,325. So the last two questions are similar to things that we've done in the past, but the initial step of getting it into the correct slope-intercept form, we had to use what we learned in this note, which was rearranging from standard form to slope-intercept form. Again, it relies heavily on algebra, so if you need a refresher, please go back to the previous lessons. But again, it focuses on canceling things out, moving things to other sides of the equal sign, opposite operations. So again, very similar to the solving equations or algebra units, except we're not solving the equations initially unless the question asks us to, like it did in C and D of the last example.